Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am Floyd Akins Jr., an Associate Vice President for University Advancement at MSU, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our program this evening, as Team University Advancement is focused on providing ways for students, alumni, and friends to remain engaged and connected to the Spartan community and to all that MSU offers. University Advancement also serves as partners and advocates when you explore ways to change lives and impact directly the many programs at MSU and throughout the world by making philanthropic investments. We have an excellent program planned, and it is gratifying to see such a large and committed audience gathered to learn more about diversity, equity, and inclusion at MSU. Many of you submitted questions for our speakers, and I want to thank you for your thoughtfulness, which has helped guide discussion for this evening. A couple of housekeeping items as we get rolling. First, we have muted your mics to minimize any sound distractions. Secondly, while we want to focus on our conversation between our speakers, we will monitor the chat and do our best to get to the additional questions as time allows. Now, I am pleased to kick off our program by introducing our two speakers. First, President Stanley joined MSU almost 2 years ago as our 21st president, coming to us from Stony Brook University. He is a distinguished biomedical researcher and thought leader in higher education, and he is proving himself to be a strong force for diversity, equity, and inclusion, for student success initiatives, and for student health and safety. His specialty is in rare infectious diseases, a unique strength we are fortunate to have in our leader at this time for sure. He is also a believer in community engagement. For example, he has been living on campus since his arrival to MSU. Also with us this evening is Jabbar Bennett, MSU's Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer, who joined the university in December. He was previously the inaugural Associate Provost for Diversity and Inclusion at Northwestern University and has held administrative and faculty positions at Brown University and Harvard Medical School. He received a bachelor's degree in biology with a minor in Spanish from North Carolina A&T State University and a doctoral degree in biomedical sciences from Meharry Medical College. He completed postdoctoral research training at Harvard Medical School and is an alumnus of Harvard University Administrative Fellows Program and Massachusetts Educational Policy Fellowship Program. Reporting directly to President Stanley, Vice President Bennett will collaborate with other university senior executives, deans, faculty, staff, students, and alumni to develop and implement a comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion plan for MSU. President Stanley and Vice President Bennett, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Floyd, and thank you everybody for making tonight possible. I'm very excited about this opportunity. I'm seeing Jabbar as we've seen each other really since we hired him for Michigan State University, and we were so lucky to do that remotely. And I'm looking forward to the day that he and I actually will be in a studio together and in an office together and have the chance to talk. But he's really a remarkable individual, and we'll learn more about him in just a second. I did want to say how much I appreciate everybody coming tonight. This is a special one of these sessions, I think very important. Since I arrived at Michigan State University, I've talked a lot about the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and how that matters so much to the university. When people feel they're in an environment where they're welcomed, where they're appreciated, and where they feel safe, they do their best work. And at Michigan State University, we really aspire to be that environment. And it's key that we do work in diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as relationship violence and sexual misconduct. These have been two major issues for the university. So we've developed strategic plans for each of them. And one of the things we'll talk about tonight is our strategic plan for diversity, equity, inclusion. And how that will serve as a blueprint for us as we move forward, and again, in that goal of making Michigan State University a destination for people where they can feel safe and do their best work. So that'll be the emphasis, I think, on our conversation tonight, is talking about DEI at Michigan State University and how we can do more and do better in that area. So as I said, we're very fortunate to have Jabbar join us from Northwestern University. He has hit the ground running, literally. He and I have been together in multiple meetings as he's gotten to know the campus in the way that I did earlier. meeting as many people as he can, listening and learning from them in every way, shape, and form. And that has really helped him, I think, understand the university in a very short amount of time. No one fully understands MSU. There's buildings in MSU I've never been into, and still at this point in time. So I still have work to do after almost 2 years. But I think he really has been making a tremendous effort to get to know people and to become part of the community, and therefore be much more effective in helping us move this issues forward, as I said. So Jabbar, I'm really delighted that you decided to join Michigan State University, and specifically to lead our diversity, equity, inclusion office at this really important time. What are some of the reasons that we were able to convince you to come to MSU?
Thank you, President Stanley, for the kind words, and I'll tell you why I came and why I'm so happy to be here. But first, let me also thank Floyd and University Advancement for their commitment to this work, both internally among their staff, but also in working with alumni to ensure that diverse voices are heard within alumni or within advancement. I apologize. The Development Associates Program and Advanced Youth Internship Program have helped to think about exposing staff to opportunities in this space. And I was really glad to learn about a DEI working group within advancement as well that's working to identify barriers to engagement and investment in MSU. And a lot of work has been done to partner with the Black Alumni Association and the GLBT Alumni Association. So it's all really important. And what's also, I think, keenly important for alumni is that we're working to collect more inclusive data about your interests so that we can ensure that we provide opportunities for you to engage. So why did I join Michigan State University? Well, MSU is a leading global research university, and it attracts students and scholars from around the world. The core values of MSU around quality, inclusion, and connectivity surely do align with my own values and my beliefs. And there's also a solid foundation to build this work upon, this work of diversity, equity, inclusion, with partners and allies who've been at MSU, some for decades and some who've recently come on board. But there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm from everyone that I've met who wants to be a part of this. I was excited, when the opportunity came around to be a part of work where I knew that there were leaders at this institution, just like you, President Stanley, and others who are committed to the ideals of diversity, equity, inclusion, and understand what MSU's place can be in this history of our state and our nation and the world as well. And I spent the past several months engaging in DEI strategic planning efforts that I'm encouraged by the bold ideas that have come forward and the real promise of this work that we'll talk about hopefully a little bit later. I want to tell you a little bit, though, about me and why I personally have been interested in these broad issues of diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm a Southerner by birth, born and reared in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, youngest child and only son of two parents who both attended historically Black colleges. I'm the great grandson of enslaved Africans who were held captive in South Carolina, and I attended public schools in North Carolina. Graduated from the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics in Durham, and my undergrad institution, which you heard about, a historically Black college of North Carolina, is also a public institution. I went on after getting my PhD to train at Harvard Medical School, and this gives you a bit of insight into why I am so excited about this work of diversity, equity, inclusion. And it was during the postdoc that I decided to focus my efforts in this space because I found myself being the only one who looked like me within my research environment and across my entire department at that time, full of hundreds of people. And I knew that if I were in a different position, one administrative, I could help expose people to opportunities to train and do all the wonderful things they like to do. So just like Harvard Medical School and other places I've worked, MSU is a place where students can dream big, where faculty can pursue their passion, and where staff can work in a safe, respectful, and inclusive environment where their presence and their contributions are truly valued. That's why I came to MSU, President Stanley.
Well, what an amazing answer, and thank you. And it was so nice to learn something about you more than I knew before. I certainly knew your resume and all the accomplishments, but to hear the personal story behind you, and I think what really drove you here, I think is really critical. So thank you. Let me follow up a little bit. You and I have been talking business, basically, since you first came. But I'll take advantage tonight maybe to go a little bit beyond that. Tell me a little bit about the things that you enjoy outside of work.
Sure. Appreciate the question. So I'll go back a little ways, and I won't say how many years, but I actually was a competitive sprinter and high hurdler back in high school, and I was even ranked nationally at the time. So today, of course, I'm just jogging at my own pace, which I think people can understand. But last summer, due to COVID and being creative and thinking about how to fill my time, I began cycling more. And I've gotten really excited and enjoy my bike rides outside. And I do have a Peloton too that I don't ride enough. But I also love good music, great food, and comedies. I love funny movies. I love to laugh. So there's something you didn't know.
Yes, and pretty much all of it. And I think I said in my introduction, you've hit the ground running. Little did I know that would actually be pretty impressive if we actually saw that. And then, of course, I actually share your, at least riding bicycles, share that enjoyment of riding bicycles as well. I also ride my bike, and you'll find there are great bike paths on campus. So you can really have very safe rides, essentially, but cover really significant distances on our campus because of the bike paths that are there. And then I have a Peloton as well. So don't tell me your username, because I won't look up how who goes faster or farther. But it's nice to know there's a fellow Pelotoner in the group. So I mentioned before that you've only been with us since December, and that has been remotely. But from those interactions you've had with the people on campus, and obviously that's critical. The buildings are amazing here, but the people on campus are really the critical component. What are kind of your first impressions about Michigan State University?
Sure. What I have noted since my time at MSU is consistent with what I experienced during my interview process several months ago. And what that is a true love and passion for MSU that I have seen demonstrated by our faculty, staff, students, and for the alumni that I've been able to interact with to date.
Perfectly.
And this struck me in a particular way that I haven't experienced before on other campuses. And what I want to do is figure out how to harness and leverage this passion that I know so many of us have around this work. And at the same time, be very intentional about being inclusive in the diverse voices that we hear when we're making decisions and when we're taking actions, and also understanding diverse perspectives as well. That is really a top priority for me. In the short term, I'm working to ensure that my team has what it needs to be successful in helping to lead this work, but also supporting faculty, staff, and students from across the campus who engage in these efforts every day as well. So I'm beginning to get organized around prioritizing recommendations for the Task Force on Racial Equity and Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Steering Committee, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about. But these are the things that are currently on my mind.
So shortly after I arrived in 2019, and I mentioned this in the introduction, I made the decision to set in motion a number of important planning initiatives with the intent that each would integrate with each other. And those included institutional strategic planning, so really a strategic plan for the university as a whole, which is working very well and it continues. Another focus, as I mentioned, on relationship violence and sexual misconduct, or RVSM. That was released last month and is available online, so you can see clearly an important issue for Michigan State University, and I know something alumni and others will be interested in, so you can see that plan, which I think lays out our actions there. And finally, an initiative that's focused on diversity, equity, inclusion. And this has been a very comprehensive process that involved a number of individuals from the university who come from very different and inclusive backgrounds coming together to develop this plan. Could you tell us a little bit where that plan stands right now?
Absolutely. Happy to talk about the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Steering Committee's report and the framework for strategic plan. And one thing I will say before I talk specifically about the work that has just begun over the past year plus under your leadership to organize these efforts is that for more than 50 years, MSU has sought to provide central support for work like this, the recruitment, retention, advancement of students, faculty, and staff who are members of underrepresented groups. Going back to the 60s, this work initially focused on meeting compliance regulations. But what it has evolved into is something magnificent around increasing diversity, promoting inclusion, ensuring equity, and enhancing outreach and engagement beyond the institution. So both the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee, and, along with the Task Force on Racial Equity, have taken a really comprehensive and expansive review of our broad diversity, equity, inclusion efforts to understand what gaps exist or opportunities for development, but also to call out examples or exemplars of programs or efforts we may want to consider that could be scaled up and potentially used and spread across the institution. There are four major themes that have emerged from the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Steering Committee work that is producing a framework for a strategic plan to be fully articulated. And those themes are increase diversity, ensure equity, promote inclusion, and also enhance outreach and engagement. And as we think about the report that is forthcoming that'll outline these four themes, and also provide some preliminary recommendations, we'll be thinking in the coming months around the feasibility of the recommendations, engaging leaders as well as other individuals on campus to help people understand that this is a shared responsibility to get this work done. We all have a role to play. We'll work collectively on prioritizing the proposed recommendations along with their actions, think about appropriate metrics so that we can assess our progress. We also have to think about accountability and what that looks like for everyone, every individual, but especially for leaders, and then think about how to implement and move forward. I talked about those four areas around diversity, equity, inclusion, outreach, engagement, which emerged from the steering committee report, but I'll just say quickly that there also has been some really important work done over the course of a year by the Task Force on Racial Equity, which you also charged. And that group looked at three main areas: campus climate and safety, faculty and staff diversity, and policing. So the next steps that I mentioned regarding prioritizing recommendations and considering feasibility for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Steering Committee report and subsequent strategic plan also apply here to the Task Force on Racial Equity. But for both efforts, we're really focusing on issues around recruitment and retention, data and resources, research and curricula, alumni, community engagement. I talked about the work of the policing group as part of the Task Force on Racial Equity. We want to expand the police department's inclusion and anti-bias unit. And in all the work that we do, we can't forget to acknowledge the role of intersectionality. The fact that all of us are more than one thing or hold more than one identity, we have to understand what it means for individuals who have multiple or complex identities, which may compound experiences that they have adversely or in a beneficial way. And we're also thinking about who we do business with at the institution, thinking about supplier diversity. Who are our vendors? Who are our contractors? Are we working with minority-owned and women-owned businesses and businesses owned and operated by disabled people and veterans? This is really important to us as we think about work moving forward. We also want to be responsive to, in all of these efforts, what's happening day to day, incidents of bias that may be happening on campus with our students and employees, and that's keenly important. What we also know about an institution as large as Michigan State University is that there are areas where work and attention to diversity, equity, inclusion have been ongoing, and that commitment has been evident for years, even decades. But there are other areas and units where we really have to focus a bit more. There are truly disparities in compensation for some. We're trying to provide education to all of our students around diversity, equity, inclusion through an effort that was charged by you last year to develop an online DEI or diversity, equity, inclusion online foundation module that all students and employees were responsible to complete. And, you know, we can't forget about our students and think about how to support and recruit students who may be underrepresented across the state and the nation and even students around the world, and focus on their success, graduation rates, time to degree, probationary discrepancies, and so forth. So I'm really happy about the work that we're doing and we're committed to, and that I've been able to come and help be a part of.
It's great.
So, President Stanley, I have been doing a lot of talking. So I have a question for you, if you don't mind. So you have made a strong recommitment of Michigan State University to be a leader and a contributor to racial and social justice. And I wonder if you could share with us some of your thoughts and why you see Michigan State University as a significant force for helping to build a more just society.
Well, it's a great question, and it's something I think you've alluded to a lot of the explanation for why MSU is going to be important in the conversation we just had. I think probably the most profound way that MSU supports justice in our society is through the efforts of our graduates, the alumni who are participating with us tonight, and the impact they have around the world. We have a network of more than 500,000 Spartans around the country, and we hope the values they've learned really are carried forward. So just this fall, of course, we just finished graduation. It was incredibly exciting, and we awarded more than 9,000 degrees this spring. And we hope that each of those graduates, as I said before, carry our shared values into the world. As an institution, I believe at MSU, we believe that our differences are also our assets. We want to foster a community that respects and celebrates a broad range of backgrounds, viewpoints, experience. Inclusion can take place when everyone in our community sees it as their responsibility to practice and uphold these values. And I think that's been incredibly important for us. And as we've done in the plan and in the DEI plan and how we're going to implement it, we have to acknowledge the reality of structural racism, something as president I've tried to do in the messages and remarks I've made to the MSU community. This is similar in many respects to our efforts around relationship violence and sexual misconduct. We have to build upon a mutual set of expectations about how we treat one another. As I said at the beginning, a campus that is safe, respectful, and welcoming and supportive for all is my top priority, and I believe that's where everyone does their best work. So I believe we can do this. I believe we can come together. In late 2020, we introduced, as you said, Jabbar, DEI Foundations at MSU. This is an educational program required for all students and employees, focusing on core DEI principles. The intent is to establish an understanding and expectations that support our campus climate early in a student's career at MSU. We aim to increase understanding of all historically marginalized groups as part of this education. It's really important to emphasize, of course, we are an institute of higher education, an outstanding institute of higher education. So we need to find ways to incorporate DEI into our educational process and provide opportunities for further education for individuals so they can learn more about this critical issue. So I'm going to throw it right back in your court and ask you more about the DEI plan. You and I have talked a lot about how one measures success in our DEI effort. This is incredibly important. We're going to make a number of efforts in this area. How do we know if the things we're doing are effective? Can you share with me what you see as the greatest indicator of success in our efforts?
Sure, thank you for that question. Well, first I'll say that this is our shared responsibility, and not just me and you, President Stanley, but every Spartan has a role to play in advancing these efforts. And I include our alumni as well, because they'll always be Spartans. The work that we do, as I mentioned before, has to be intersectional, it has to be trauma-informed, and it must be action-oriented. And along with those things, our efforts have to be assessed. So metrics are necessary, as well as accountability, to ensure that we are making adequate progress and that we can also sort of understand when we need to make a course correction along the way too. So success of these efforts to me looks like when everyone at MSU thinks about diversity, equity, inclusion, and uses that lens, when we're making decisions, when we're having conversations, when we are making actions, ensuring that we're thinking about how our words, our actions, our commitments, how they all reflect on each other in this community, which is very diverse, very large, but which we want to make sure is inclusive, safe, and welcoming for everyone.
So one question that I am often asked, and you alluded to this to some degree in your last answer, is how alumni can actually help us with our objectives.
So thank you for that. And there are several volunteer and giving opportunities within university advancement, my office and beyond that alumni can tap into, and I'll talk about some of those. Within advancement, there are opportunities for alumni to create a profile on MSU Connect. You can join your degree granting colleges community so that our student population can benefit from an alumni family's diversity of thought, experience, beliefs, professions, and locations. Alumni can reach out to their degree granting college to inquire about diversity, equity, inclusion related initiatives within the colleges, and they can support the effort that is happening there. You can seek out your nearest alumni club community to support and participate in diverse social, service, and philanthropic efforts that engage students, parents, alumni, and friends. And alumni can search from more than 900 student organizations for groups that support diverse students and groups that you might consider of interest and maybe a priority to us. I encourage alumni to also subscribe to MSU Today to ensure that you are aware of what's happening on campus. And also they feature lots of developments that we're currently working on as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, and our strategic priorities. Within my office, which is called the Office for Inclusion and Intercultural Initiatives, we have various scholarships, grants, and awards that we give to honor students as well as employees for various contributions toward advancing diversity, equity, inclusion. There's the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Endowed Scholarship Program. We have a Creating Inclusive Excellence Grant Program, which allows individuals and units to take innovative ideas that they have to advance diversity, equity, inclusion at the local or larger level. We enable that work through these grants every year. We have an Excellence in Diversity Awards program that acknowledges the work that individuals on campus have done to promote diversity, equity, inclusion. And we have a diversity research network, which serves more than 650 faculty of color and diverse scholars. They offer grants to support these faculty and scholars' work, various awards, fellowship opportunities, and provide support for publication. There are opportunities to support dialogue that happens between students, faculty, and staff. Our MSU Dialogues really brings individuals together across various identities so that you can learn more about each other. You can talk about your own identity and what comes along with that, and explore yourself and explore what it means for you to be in a space as an individual who's a part of a larger community. So there's quite a bit of work and programming and opportunities available for all of our alumni to be engaged, as well as our students and our faculty as well. And I'm happy to be a part of this work, and I'm happy to provide information to those who may be interested in being engaged as well. All you have to do is reach out to me, reach out to my office, and I can be helpful in getting you connected.
So that's wonderful and a really comprehensive answer, and thank you. And I think there's no question that alumni can play a key role in helping us in this area. One of the things that I've found so effective is students may be concerned about coming to MSU, particularly as we recruit new students, is an environment that's welcoming. And so as alums who've successfully navigated MSU, your words and how you found the experiences are incredibly important. So ways in which, if you're interested, we can get you in front of students we're trying to recruit, or even faculty and staff we're trying to recruit, so they understand that the work we're doing is important. We value it at Michigan State University, and hopefully many of you have had positive experiences at MSU, and that's why you choose to stay engaged with the university. So we have a little extra time, Jabbar, and I'm going to ask you another question, but I know it's something that we've certainly talked a lot about. And I think if you were to look at the makeup of our student body, its diversity to a large degree looks like the state of Michigan. So if you looked at the makeup of our student body, it would resemble, I think, the population of Michigan as a whole. But if you look at our faculty and staff, it doesn't. And we see underrepresentation from a number of populations, particularly people of color, in the representation of faculty and staff. So how do we work? And you and I have talked about it, and I'm happy to supplement your answer. But what are some of the tactics we're thinking about in the strategic plan to help us deal with this and help us get a population that looks more like our students? Our students talk a lot to us, and they say it's really important that I have a mentor who looks like me. That's very important sometimes, to have an advisor who may look like me, someone who comes from the same geographic region I do, or someone who may speak the same primary language I do. How do we help with this, and how do we make progress in hiring a more diverse faculty and staff?
Thank you for the question. And as you said, MSU is not unlike other universities across the country where our student population tends to be more diverse than our faculty or staff. And the only way we're going to truly diversify our faculty is through intentional efforts to determine and form strategic partnerships with organizations, with fellowship programs that are training diverse individuals who are looking to join a faculty at a place like MSU, where resources are vast and where the student population that they would teach and instruct is quite diverse as well. And we also have to help faculty understand the importance of diversity amongst their ranks. So faculty hire faculty is something that I have heard said at MSU, and that is very true. So this begins early on with how we even think about job descriptions, how we think about the language that we're using to ensure that it's inclusive, that it's not gendered, and that words that we use and phrases that we might describe will not make certain candidates feel like this isn't a place that they may want to come and work, or that it's not a place that would truly embrace them and their identities holistically. There has to be work beyond the announcements, though, and it has to actually reach out and expand to the actual search committees. We have been working over time to provide education and training to members of search committees to make them aware of the necessity to really consider diversity, but first considering the metrics, considering the fact that you want to hire a person who can do the job the way that you've outlined it, based on the priorities of the department or even the college or the school. But you also want to take into consideration that person's experiences, that person's attributes. What is it about the candidate holistically in this process where we're considering hiring that would really make them beneficial to advance the teaching research mission of the university, but also be a good colleague who could help to bring new ideas, that could create some innovative research opportunities, some collaborative interdisciplinary opportunities across departments and even across colleges as well. So we have to continue work with training and educating our committees around how to think about and approach searches, but we also have to ensure that our faculty and all of us as well are aware of our own biases, because we do have them. Unconscious biases are real. I have them, you have them, and everyone who's tuned in has them as well. What's important is that we acknowledge them and that we learn how to manage these biases in situations, especially where we have to remain objective. We really have to remain objective and think about, again, the core qualifications and the reasons why we may want our faculty to join. So thinking about, again, how we advertise to recruit faculty, how we talk about the rich student population areas to teach and to engage in the classroom, but also with our colleagues who are on search committees around their selection. And while we're talking about faculty, if I can just say a bit more, President Stanley, we want to ensure that once we recruit diverse faculty to join our community, that we are doing what we can to acknowledge and support their holistic identities. So what supports are in place to help connect faculty with others who share similar research interests or similar identities. You'll have faculty who, maybe are caregivers. They have young kids, or they have parents or elders that they're providing care for. How do we connect those individuals together to have conversations outside of the workplace, outside of the content area of expertise that they may have, so that they can get support that they need, again, to support their whole lives? So it's really important that we think about not only the recruitment, but the retention of faculty, which I just spoke about. And lastly, I'll say something about advancement and promotion. It's keenly important that for all faculty, but especially for those who may be underrepresented, or they don't have anyone else in their family who's pursued a faculty career, that we make clear the pathway toward promotion and tenure, to ensure that faculty know what they need to do so they can get the support that's required, both in their home department or within their college or school, or even outside of that. So there is pathway clarity around the path to tenure and promotion that's necessary, but also other supports for professional and personal development. I mentioned the Diversity Research Network that sits in my office that supports faculty of color, but also scholars of any particular race or identity who choose to do diversity, equity, inclusion related research. That network provides a wealth of programming, seminars on grant writing, writing groups where people can get together and motivate one another in this process, social networking opportunities, and again, an array of opportunities for faculty to be enriched and also to learn from and with their colleagues. So it's really important that we have a diverse faculty, but we can only do it if we're intentional.
It's a great answer, and I just want to expand on a couple of the points. The first is, I couldn't agree more about the issue around hidden biases, and I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have, and one of the components, as you've talked about in the DEI strategic plan, is to find ways to have members on search committees take hidden bias training so they can recognize what are the things that may be in their subconscious or not out in front of their mind that they may make them reject candidates or not give due credence to candidates for reasons which they may not even be aware of, but which guide their opinions and the kinds of views they have of individuals. And so this is incredibly important. And as you said, I think everybody has them. I underwent the training more than 15 or 20 years ago, and it was, at the time, it was new. I learned a tremendous amount about some of the biases I had. It's been very important for me, I think, going forward, and I probably should consider doing it over again. At the same time, I think I'd also really want to talk about one of the important things you talked about was this issue around ensuring faculty success. And we find that many times for some of our underrepresented faculty, we call upon them too much. We want them to be engaged in search committees because we want presence of an inclusive search committee and diverse search committees as we move forward. But many of them have important work to do, of course, on their pathway towards tenure. So striking that balance and making sure that we don't overutilize the talents of our underrepresented faculty, I think is very important, and something I needed to be made aware of as well, because many of them are so talented, they do great work, and yet we may call upon them too much and interfere with their ability to move their careers going forward. So that's another area I think that we have to be particularly sensitive about, is making sure that we're, not only do we do that, but we account for their service to the university when we think about things around promotion and tenure, that we recognize if you're doing particular service in mentorship, in service to the university and being on these committees, to recognize that as one of the elements, which we do already, as one of the elements of the tenure, and make sure we don't forget about that going forward. So these, I think, are really critical issues. I've found as I've searched for leaders of the university and use search firms, that often the pool is just not diverse enough. I'll look at the pool and take a look at it and realize that they're not diverse enough in terms of the candidates that have been put forward. And my tact at that point has been to say, I need a diverse pool. I know you can find a diverse pool if you're a search firm. I know there's talented people from multiple races, ethnicities out there. LGBTQ and so on. I know they're out there, and I think we need to make sure we have adequate representation in these searches if we're going to move forward. Because if not, we're missing significant aspects of talent, outlets of talent for us going forward. So these things are incredibly important. So I think those are some of the things I think about in terms of these issues around faculty and hiring. But again, it remains a challenge. And I think it's one of those things where we are going to make a very strong commitment. I think we are making a very strong commitment, but it will take time. the turnover of faculty is relatively low. So we have to be very intentional about what we're doing, making sure you're casting a broad net, making sure that we're getting rid of hidden biases and giving every opportunity to bring talent to Michigan State University, because that's really the human capital that's so important to us, right? Is our talented faculty and staff are what make us a great university. This is something that's featured in the university's strategic plan. We talk not just about DEI, but we also talk about the development of our faculty and staff and their ability to proceed in their jobs and move forward. So this whole notion of promotion and tenure is built into our strategic plan in terms of finding ways to optimize each person's potential at Michigan State University. And we will reap rewards from doing that in terms of our output and productivity by finding great people and giving them the opportunity to succeed at the university. So anything else that you want to cover that we feel we should have covered that we haven't addressed tonight? We've done a great job, I think, covering the main questions I had, and you've been very eloquent and covered them very well. But are there other things you wanted to put forward or talk about before we wrap up?
I'll just say again, I talked about the goals that we have as an institution around diversity, equity, inclusion. Some may consider very bold, and some may not consider them to be bold enough. But I think that it will take all of us at MSU, and I'm including alumni in this. I keep talking about shared responsibility and Spartans. We're all Spartans here, and there is an opportunity and a role for everyone to play in advancing this work. On campus, again, I was inspired initially by the history of MSU and just knowing about the history and commitment of these efforts to diversify and advance the student population, faculty and staff as well. And there's so much opportunity to think about how to enhance these efforts and bolster them with a focused diversity, equity, inclusion strategic plan, and with your support and that of many others. I'll say one other thing because I think it's important. We've talked a lot about increasing diversity, ensuring equity, and also promoting inclusion, on campus. But the last goal that emerged out of diversity, equity, inclusion strategic planning process was around outreach and engagement. And to me, that relates to the students who we may recruit who want to study at Michigan State University, as well as the faculty and staff that we hire. So we talk specifically about how to enhance or approach faculty diversity, but we also have to be thoughtful about what we're saying and who we say we are and who we're demonstrating that we are to prospective students and staff as well. So there are many opportunities to be engaged in our local community, in the East Lansing area, the greater Lansing area, to think about partnerships with public schools, to think about working with teachers to help prepare students to get the type of education and preparation they need to be successful in their chosen majors at Michigan State University. We also want to ensure that we are providing professional development opportunities and other supports and leveraging our resources to support those teachers, who are providing the education. I want to be sure that we are partnering with organizations and with individuals who could benefit from not only being connected with us differently potentially, but also ensuring that they are building their capacity to offer or provide whatever service that they need in the community. Because when the community is strong, so is MSU. Many of our faculty, staff, and even students live in the greater Lansing and East Lansing community and have called it home, even after graduating from Michigan State University. And I'm sure that's true for many Spartans who are alumni who are on this call today. So I want to ensure that in all of our efforts that we are being thoughtful, that we're being intentional, and we're helping to build capacity to an extent. And there's one more piece I'll mention about outreach and engagement that's keenly important to me as Michigan State University sits on the ancestral lands of Native Americans, is that we think about how to work with and collaborate with our Native American tribes across the state of Michigan. And there has been work and continues to be work going on campus with individuals, with staff and faculty affinity groups, with students as well, who identify as Native American, Indigenous, or who are allies. But I want to be sure that we are doing what we can to help support members of the broader Native and Indigenous communities, and that we can work with them to ensure that we're doing what we should to support and provide education to members of our campus around the histories there, around the land grant status of our institution. And I was happy to see that this is one of the areas and it's a priority in the institution's overall strategic planning process. So these are things that are keenly important. And these are some of the reasons that I was attracted to MSU. I knew about some of this work, of course, before I came here through my own research. But to see the demonstrated commitment and passion of individuals day to day has been very heartening. I'm encouraged even more that this is the right place to be for me at this time, to sort of jump in and add what I can to maintain the momentum that's been created and that you have sustained that you're leading. And again, I couldn't imagine being anywhere else doing this work, just based on, again, your leadership, the support of everyone at MSU and on this call, and just the promise ahead for all of us.
Vice President Bennett and President Stanley, thank you for this incredible conversation on this important dialogue that we're having. We are close to the end of our time together, and I want to thank you all for being with us and for your questions. And thanks also, once again, to President Stanley and Vice President Bennett for such a candid conversation. I now want to turn this back to President Stanley for his final thoughts.
Well, thank you so much, Floyd, and thank you so much, Jabbar. That was an outstanding presentation, and I think, obviously, I hope the Spartans out there can understand now why I was so enthusiastic about bringing Dr. Bennett to Michigan State University. He is an extraordinary leader and is really going to help us so much in this area. As I wrap up tonight, I'm thinking of, probably about 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years and 1 month ago, before I came to MSU, I had lunch with Clifton Wharton, of course, the former president of Michigan State University, and his wife, Dolores. And we talked about his time at Michigan State University and all the things he'd accomplished and some of the challenges he'd had. And one of the challenges he'd had was dealing with this issue around diversity, equity, inclusion on the MSU campus. And I think right now, I talked to Clifton probably about a month ago. And I was proud to be able to tell him about the work we were doing and some of the progress we were making. Some of the challenges he faced, 50 years ago, or roughly 50 years ago, 40 years ago, are still present at Michigan State University. But we are making progress, and I think we are committed to that progress. So I look forward, again, working with you, our alums, and, of course, the campus itself, and our elected officials and everyone else to really doing our work to make our community as welcoming and inclusive as we can, and again, for our Spartans to have impact around the world in caring about these critical issues. So thank you so much this evening, and again, I look forward to seeing you in person on campus at some time very soon.